I think the spiritual community is full of shit. When we white knuckle control grip on things, if my right hand is the universe, there's no room for her to get in. It truly felt like God or source or the universe or whoever, whatever language feels best for you, saying that's not who I am. Just because it's not easy, it doesn't mean it's not meant for you. You create the feeling internally before the outcome arrives. Hello, hello. How are you today?
Excellent. The dogs are thinking that you're greeting them and me, so they're all at the door now.
Aww. The hair looks fabulous.
Mhm.
Ooh, it's giving 70s, the whole thing.
Wow, I love that vibe. That's my vibe. You know that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So you're very on brand today, which I love. Did you get a
Uh,
deck?
of
I
course.
had one ready. All right. So, everyone, Brittany is back on the show today. You just saw her not that long ago, but we're switching it up today because actually, let me shuffle my cards first and then we'll pull the cards and then I'll explain what's going on. These ones are hard to. Which deck did you use?
I have the Threads of Fate Rose Gold deck out
Ooh,
today. It's an Oracle deck.
love that. I have my Starseed Oracle one out.
Hmm.
I think that's another one you told me to get.
I'm sure it is. That's one of my go-tos.
Same. It was one of the like first decks that I like the just traditional tarot was the first deck that I initially connected to, and then this was the second one, I think.
What
Ooh.
do we got today? Oh,
Wow.
oh, mama, this is perfect.
I'm so excited to see what you pulled because hold on.
Let's get into this. Right now, we have the sage as our theme.
Oh,
This
we love that. And then
is
over here we have the golden children.
Mm,
So inner child, tenderness, innocence, and rare gifts.
uh,
Love that. Love that.
so
Okay. So today we are doing something that I've never done on the show. I've never really seen anybody else do it either, but we're going to flip the script and Brittany is actually going to interview me. So I wanted to do this because I love being interviewed on other podcasts and I love doing solo episodes, but I feel like it's just different when you have somebody else, especially somebody that knows you super well. Brittany knows me better than like 99% of people. It's just different when you have somebody else extracting things out of you versus you just kind of talking to a room with yourself. So I am taking on the sub role today, and
uh,
Brittany's going to dom this conversation. So I'm super excited. So I will just let you run it from here.
let's do it. So I am excited that people are going to get to see a side of you that I love and adore. And we need infinitely more of in every space. So let's walk into our spiritual path.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So you posted today, you started to share a little bit about your spiritual journey. I hope everyone read every single word. Talk to me about your journey to yourself.
Ooh, that's such a loaded question, isn't it? Because it's a lifelong thing, right?
Mhm.
So on like the spiritual self side, I grew up what I would label as Christian-ish. Like I'm definitely not somebody that I was as indoctrinated in religion as a lot of people. Like it was never something that it was, we weren't reading the Bible every day. We weren't doing this, we weren't doing that. We were very much so we go to church on Sunday and on Christmas Eve and on Easter type people. And so that was just, I grew up with that. And then it kind of started to taper off, middle school, high school, we were really only going at Christmas, or I would go sometimes with my mom or with my grandma if she like really wanted us to go. But it was more so like by convention. And then when I was a senior in high school, I started dating a guy that was incredibly Christian, like raised in a Chick-fil-A family, not joking, like dad worked for Chick-fil-A, like the whole situation. And so that was coming off of a time when I had been like really traumatized the year before And so I was like ready to latch on to anything. Like I was in a very fresh, vulnerable state. And I was like, oh my God, this person is like giving me love and giving me care and all of these things. So like, of course, let me just adopt this ideology. It's something that I grew up with. Let me just dive into it. And so that was kind of my journey in becoming more Christian-ish. We were kind of blurring the line of ish and just kind of more diving in, but I still like, I've never read the Bible front to back, but I like started adopting just like very much so that belief system. And even in that though, there was always like this constant tension because I'm somebody that I've always been, and I know that not all Christians are anti this, but a lot of them are, but I've always been very pro LGBTQ community. Like I grew up in dance, I grew up in the arts. And so there was always this tension of like, well, I don't support the people that don't support that. And, you know, if God made them, then God made them that way. So there's always that tension. Did not love the kind of portrayal of the subservience of women to men. Don't agree with that for obvious reasons. But I was just like, I still like, I've always been a very spiritually inclined person, like always believed in and wanted to believe in a higher power, like having that guidance, all of those things. And so I just kind of carried that with me. And eventually that relationship turned very toxic and very controlling. But I still like kept that belief system. And even after we broke up, I kept that belief system. And then it was 2017. I was living in Louisville, Kentucky, and I talked about this in the post today, but I decided to get rebaptized. It was in October, which is the month that we're in now. And shortly after, like not even a few weeks after, I was just standing in my kitchen and I don't remember what I was thinking about or what exactly I was doing, but then this just knowing comes in. And whenever I have knowings, it's literally always like top left of head, just kind of drops in. And I'm like, I don't know where this came from. But all it said was, that's not who I am. And it wasn't talking about me. It wasn't me talking about me. It truly felt like God or source or the universe or whoever, whatever language feels best for you, saying that's not who I am, aka the restrictive, you know, especially because where I got baptized was super Southern Baptist type church. So that whole, I was living in Kentucky at the time. Like if you've lived in Kentucky, you know what that's like, or anywhere like in the Bible Belt, you know what that's like. But it was just like, this is not who I am. And so at the time I was just like, kind of just nodding. I was like, okay, amazing, great. And so I was just like, well, I'm just not doing the Christian thing anymore. And that was kind of it for that moment. And that, when I trace it back, that was really the beginning of my spiritual awakening of source, universe, God, goddess, whoever you want to call it. I typically just say universe or source. That was the beginning of, in hindsight, my kind of spiritual awakening. And so then the next little point in that story was when I went through breast implant illness, and why I view that as part of my kind of coming home to self and spiritual awakening journey is because, especially as somebody that is very like, I I joke, but it's not a joke. Like I have one foot in the physical realm and one foot in like the metaphysical realm. Like I'm very connected to my body and to like the physical plane. And that was really the first experience where, in the context of the physical body, because I've always been very science-based, you know, follow the literature, this is what the data says, etc. The first experience that I had where it was like, there's more than meets the eye. What we currently accept to be true and know to be true in the broad sense does not always apply, because breast implant illness wasn't recognized as an illness. They still don't know the exact mechanism, because obviously some people are unaffected, but some people are even more affected than I was. So then going through explanting and having all of my random illness symptoms go away, that was like, okay, everything you know, you no longer know, because it has been disproven by your own experience. And so I was like, okay, wow, amazing. And that was also, I truly believe, one of the first times in my life when I really surrendered to an experience, because I've always been somebody that I like to control things. We know my placements. I like to be the one steering the ship. But with that was, even choosing to have the surgery, I was like, I have a lot of faith and trust and like intuitive knowing that this will help me, but I still don't know. I have no way of knowing until I do it. And then I did it. And it was truly like magic what happened to me and for me after that. And so that really opened my eyes of, oh shit, things are not what they seem. And then the following summer, first experience with psychedelics. It was not necessarily a profound spiritual experience. I took like 3 grams of mushrooms and fell asleep a few hours later. Then the next day was in a car wash and I was like, fuck, these are not done yet. It was not spiritual at all. I've talked about that before. But then just these drips after that of like things are not what they seem, and just kind of having that, not, there was no like routine behind it. And I still I don't necessarily think you're supposed to have a massive routine to all of it. It just kind of happens. There's a level of chaos in your spirituality. And I think that's a good thing, because if we could predict everything, like where would the magic be? But ever since then, it's just been kind of this gradual journey of coming home. And then 2020, grand sweeping gesture. 2021, I really started just like diving headfirst, especially into psychedelics, into what we would refer to as, you know, the witch stuff, quote unquote. So really started diving more into astrology. That's how we became friends, diving more into psychedelics, diving more into like learning how to read cards, and opening, basically like lifting the veil off of myself. And both are better for worse, like having some really positive, super blissful experiences of like, oh my God, magical. And then, you know, very much so like dark night of the soul of, oh my God, I am going through my complete life existential crisis. And then everything in between of like going from, oh my God, I feel so connected to everything, to, oh my God, like I'm not connected to anything at all. Like I can't hear any of the guidance or any of the source wisdom or anything like that. And so now we're in this place that's kind of what I feel like is the next leg in the journey. And I don't necessarily know what that next leg is going to look like. And that's so astronomically frustrating because, again, I like control and I like knowing what's going to happen, but I just have so much more trust in myself and in the universe. And we've talked before, like, lack of faith in the universe, in my opinion, also speaks to lack of faith in yourself, because they are one thing. And so I'm going into this next season of becoming and coming home, not knowing what's going to happen, but trusting in it. So that's the Reader's Digest.
So there were some really interesting points that you talked about. I really like the way that you describe the this isn't me knowing, because I think that experience, like just listening to you talk about like weaving the thread between like the events for you, I think that was like the precursor event for you to be able to be in that place with breast implant illness and be like, I'm open to not knowing. I'm open to things not going the way that they should be going, and following my knowing, right? If you hadn't accepted that knowing, and I want to ask too, so that this isn't me, do you think what wasn't you was like the religious component of it all, or do you think what wasn't you was investing the belief that power exists outside of yourself and gives you that power? Do you think that that's what wasn't you?
So I think more so when I heard that one, it was actually like whatever source is was saying this religious construct is not what I am. So source saying, like, I'm speaking a source like, hey, that's not who I am. And so then in my mind, hearing God say, or the universe say, you know, what religion has taught you God is not God. I think it was more of that external thing. But then that opens up the conversational door to unity consciousness versus separate consciousness, because I think a lot of Christianity teaches more of that separate consciousness. It's like you are in communion and conversation with God, and these are all entities that exist outside of you. And I never really hear Christianity speaking in the sense of like God is in you, in the way that it's not just like it's never one. It's never them moving to, through, and within you. It's always they're separate from you. They never come together. And so maybe that was the opening of the door to getting to a place where I understand more of like that unity consciousness aspect. And have obviously then experienced it, because when those things come in, they use, I pronouns. So that's not who I am. Or it's like a part of me is speaking to myself,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not me. It's not ego consciousness. It's, observer consciousness, which I would view as like higher self, guides, whatever you want to call it. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that answers the question.
So I was also raised in a Southern Baptist church.
Fun
You know,
times.
like raised in a Southern Baptist church, and I want to ask you, do you feel like maybe a part of what didn't work for you was this, like, and kind of what you were describing just now, that like this is outside of me and something I need to attain to, rather than the idea that, we're made in God's image, and it's like, okay, great, like me as I am, and like I am made in God's image, and I think that there's a separation there. Either I'm made in God's image and I fucked up somewhere, so I've got to try to get back to whatever that like purity is, or
Mm.
I'm made in God's image. He's probably a little kinky if I'm made in God's image, because I'm pretty kinky. So like where do you fall on that spectrum?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I think where it really lands for me, and I've been thinking about this a lot more, and I was thinking about this on my little silent walk this morning. it's it's like the really rigid set of rules, because first of all, I'm a rule breaker. I'm not even a rule breaker. I'm just like, this is why I'm an entrepreneur. I can do this better. Like, I can do this better. I can do this in my own way. I can do this in a way that like just fits who and what I am,
Mm-hmm.
versus being like, you must do things in this such and such way. Like, I don't personally think the path to, if we want to call it ascension, and I don't even think ascension, like people are like, oh, it's like you leaving your body and all this stuff. I'm like, no, I think ascension is just like becoming the best that you can be. 100%. Oh my God.
That's
Of
one of
course it's
the
on.
cards that was pulled. There's one more. So whenever you say the word, I'll just show you the card, because I'm
Love
sure.
that. Love that so much. Magic is happening in real time. But there's this undertone, in my opinion, of, and I don't mean to just like shit on Christianity. I know I have a lot of Christian people that follow me, but like my experience of it, that this path has to be something where you are constantly stripping yourself of, whether
Mhm.
it's of your autonomy, whether it's of your material abundance, whether it's of a life that you enjoy living without doing harm to others, those kind of things. And I'm like, I firmly believe the path to ascension for all of us should look like all of us living in abundance, whatever that looks and feels like to and for us, versus, oh my God, here's all the things that I have to get rid of about me, or that I love, or that I enjoy, in order to walk this path and to be good enough in God's eyes. I think, if, whatever created the universe, obviously the universe is massively abundant and completely limitless. So why would we then adopt a belief system that tells us to limit ourselves?
Yes. Yes. So I'm curious then, was there a point when you were sick, and like still kind of sitting in this space of, I'm not knowing, I don't know what's going on, and maybe even afterward when you were getting ready to explant, where you were like, I think I need to pray a little bit, I think I need to talk to God? Was there a point where you were like, okay, well, just in case you are it, like we need to have a conversation? Or what was that like for you?
It's so funny. The answer is no. It was a lot of me talking to myself, and not even talking to myself. It's that like silent interfacing with your intuition. Like the practical example of this is, again, like I feel things in knowings. The moment I joined the breast implant illness Facebook group and was scrolling through the stories, it was like that sunken, really rooted feeling in my gut of, this is me.
Mm-hmm.
And just that complete, no questions, trust in that.
Yeah, that's the subtle energetics of acknowledging your intuition. I think that's something that comes with time, Did you ever have an experience where you were like, is this paranoia or is this intuition? Like, have you always felt very solid in knowing when your intuition is communicating with you?
I would say that was actually one of the biggest first times. I grew up I've always been a highly perceptive and like intellectually intelligent person, and I also think emotionally intelligent person, but I fell into a lot of people pleasing tendencies. So I would warp and shift myself, which is, at the end of the day just manipulation, and I'll like take responsibility for that. But I would warp and shift myself to try and be what I thought other people would love and would want to be around and would want to be with, and all of those things. And then I kind of went through a phase in early college after I got out of that last, controlling toxic relationship, where it's kind of like what I've talked about with you, like almost like mild hurricane phase of like, I'm going completely rogue. Like, I don't give a shit about what anyone says. Like, I am just me and I'm strong in myself and all this. This is also when I found bodybuilding, which is like not lost on me at all. But that was when kind of my real relationship with myself in an honest way started. And so then arriving at that, like, and it was so funny back in, because breast implant illness timeline, when I had them taken out, when I found the Facebook group, that was 2018. Back in 2016, I remember setting the intention of, I want to get more in touch with my intuition. And that was when I was still like wrapped up in like the more Christian views, all of that. But I remember, because I have a really good friend, Katie, who she is one of the most intuitive people I've ever met. And I was like, I want to develop my intuition more. And so like she was like a guiding light in that. And so I didn't really do anything necessarily super specific. And then 2 years later, life drops me this thing. And it's like, yeah, I know this. And then after I like had that intuitive knowing, it's funny enough, I was in another not so healthy relationship at the time. And when I first told my partner, because I'd been going through a lot physically, like trying to figure things out, spent tens and thousands of dollars on doctors, all this stuff, I told him that I had found this and that I was like, I really think that this is what I'm experiencing. He called me a hypochondriac. He was like, are you sure you're not just searching for another thing that could be what's wrong? And I'm like, well, of course I'm looking for another thing that's wrong. I'm fucking awfully ill. Like, of course I'm going to be looking for that. But at first he called me a hypochondriac, and he didn't believe me until he saw another woman that was the partner of one of his friends share that she was going through the same thing. But I definitely, and I mean, that was just foreshadowing to all of the like questioning and distrust and honestly mockery that I would experience from people like peers in the fitness industry when I eventually ended up explanting and announcing it. So many people were like, you're just a liar. That's not real. That's not true. I had one girl go so far as to publicly mock me on her stories right when I was about to explant. Yeah. And it was not a fun time. But I still trusted myself. I was like, y'all might think that, but I know what's true to inform me, and this is it.
Yeah. Yeah, that sense of trust in your own intuition, I believe trust is whatever happens, it's all right. So even if I'm trusting myself and saying, okay, I'm trusting myself to make this decision, and let's say it doesn't have the best possible outcome, I still trust myself enough to know I'm going to be all right, regardless of what happens after I make that decision.
Absolutely.
So do you think, I kind of noticed when you were describing some of the things that you didn't necessarily love about like organized religion specifically, and like the church that you experience, like you were talking about, like, I don't want to have to exclude things that I love. I don't want to have to take away things that I enjoy or take away parts of myself that I enjoy. And I really, at least from an outside perspective, see that reflected in the ways that you communicate like health and wellness in like a fitness and nutrition side. Like I've followed you for years, and you have specifically continued to talk about, like, you're not going to magically become a different person. Like, you have to be able to find something that works for you without stripping away the parts of you that are absolutely vital. So where do you find the two kind of inform each other?
Okay, so the two parts being parts of you that are absolutely vital, and then what's the other side of that?
I'm speaking more to the spirituality and like the things that you're like, I want to be able to hold on to this part of myself. And do you see that reflected in the ways that you show up as like in the roles that you've had in the past as like health and wellness coach?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest area where that shows up for me personally, and then extends into my work, is we can know all that we can know about science and all of that, and I can try and apply that to a person or to myself, and yes, the science still matters, but if it makes that person miserable, what good is it? Or if something, works for me, or if I like something, or if I love something, like, you cannot just copy and paste someone else's formula into your reality and expect it to work the same way, because we're not on the exact same path. There's absolutely going to be things that are fairly ubiquitous for all people. Like, yeah, we're probably all going to feel like shit if we don't sleep enough, or if we're poorly nourished, or if we never move our bodies. But there's nuance still even in that. I use this phrase with clients all the time. I could write you the perfect training program. I could give you the best macro split I could possibly give you theoretically. But if you hate it, if it's not something you can realistically execute, if it's not something you find some enjoyment in doing, and I think there can be enjoyment found in the challenging things, because some people would be like, well, it's just hard. And sometimes you got to do hard stuff. There can be enjoyment in that. But if you can't apply that information to yourself, knowledge without application is absolutely useless. And I think that applies to the kind of spiritual side as well. It applies to everything. It applies to your sense of fashion. People ask me, like, how do I find my style all the time? I love yours. Well, the answer is not copy and pasting mine, or I could have spiritual practices that really resonate with me. Like, I love cards. I'm not into crystals, but I'm not a crystal person. Like, it's just not something that I feel a necessarily natural pull towards. And so the truth that we can't just copy and this is again why I think I really hate rules and super rigid set systems and structures, because we can't just copy and paste someone else's experience into our own and expect to feel fulfilled, because that's not coming from our own true inner knowing. That's coming from, well, I just don't know what to do and I have no idea how to trust myself, so I'm just going to try another formula. There's a difference between inspiration and imitation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that was at least something for me that I found really unpalatable, was the copy paste when it came to, like, this is what you're supposed to do in spiritual practices. This is how you're supposed to show up. And I personally couldn't reconcile the interactions I had with some people through the church, because of the church and things like that, with the living word of God. I was like, I don't know that those two are making sense. Like, it's confusing to me that I've had some of these experiences with people here, and they're the same people that are saying, like, this is how you show up in like a godly fashion. And I went to a church that was like, you're go tell it on the mountain. You're evangelizing. That's literally where I met my husband.
I remember that. Yeah.
Right. So it's not like I want to know your perspective on this. I tend to look at my evolution through, like, being raised in the church to growing out of it as more like a graduation, as like, I understand this source, this connection, this sense of spirituality is a lot more transcendent than just sitting inside this building, and interacting with these same people. So for you, do you find that some of maybe the skills that you learned, like, I don't know, prayer or something like that, is something that you still carry, or something that you still connect to, just in a different way now?
Yeah, I love that you bring that too, because then it's like, hey, we're not just throwing the whole thing away. It's like there's still valuable things to take from it. I think a really big thing, and church is not the only place that taught me this, but it could be seen as one of them, is the aspect of ritual. So like, when you're in church, you go to church on Sunday, it's at the same time. It's, you're doing the this, you're doing the that, you're doing the singing, you're doing the this and the blah, blah, blah. And like, getting into that routine with your spirituality, or just with yourself and with your daily routines, I think there's a ton of value in that. I think the general message that it's not just about you and the care for the people in your community, I think that's a big thing. I think obviously things like Bible study, meeting other people that are on the same path as you and are walking the same walk, like that sense of community and solidarity and support, that's hugely valuable. I wouldn't necessarily say that I pray in a like definitely not the way that I would when I was younger, you know, like you're laying in bed at night and you're like, okay, God, like da, 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 da. I'm definitely much more of a writer. I would consider like what I do
Yep.
almost like scripting.
Mhm.
And then also meditation, but I find I have better meditative experiences when I'm walking. So when I'm out in nature, when I'm taking a walk, that's when I get, if we want to call them downloads, when I am in movement, that's where I get my best downloads. But having some sort of dedicated time, I guess that's what we could call prayer, dedicated time to connect with whatever your spiritual practice is. So I'd say there's absolutely wonderful structural takeaways. And another one would be music. That would always be one of the biggest times when I was in church that I would feel the
Mhm.
presence of God the most is when you're singing. And like,
Yep.
and I've always just been somebody that's super moved by music, whether it's through dance or singing or anything like that. And so still to this day, like I experience a lot of spirituality through music. So
Mhm.
absolutely some wonderful kind of underpinning nuggets, just necessarily the execution of them in Christianity I've not taken with me.
Just repurposed
Yep.
for you. We don't, I always say, like, I'm not trying to throw baby Jesus out with the bathwater. Okay. Like, there
Mhm.
are things that I connect to, and something that I found to be true and also had a meditative experience around was I was going through a hard time. I'm in meditation and I'm, it's dark, it's quiet, it's still. And I like see the face of Jesus and he reaches his hand out to me. He was like, I'll help you with this one. And it was like, click, that's a starter deity. If I didn't know how to have faith, I wouldn't know how to have faith. Right. So then that was when
Mm.
I completely shifted because I swung the pendulum hard the opposite direction.
Mhm.
I identified as an atheist for a long time and then found my way in through spirituality. And when I had that connection, this is a starter deity.
Mm.
That is how you can continue this relationship. That to me made a big difference. I didn't feel
Yeah.
like I had to get rid of everything that I'd known before to make space for something that was completely new. So I'm interested, what would you consider your like go-to spiritual practices right now?
Oh, definitely writing. Writing is like my number one thing that I do. Like, I could go without reading. I could go without, actually sitting in meditation, all of that. I could go without all of that if I don't have, literally, like, my joke is I always have a pen and paper with me, no matter where I am, except for that one time in New York when I gave the waiter my number and I went to get paper and all that stuff. It's a great story. We do still talk for anybody that's wondering. I know I posted it on my Instagram stories, but I deleted it because I was like, I don't want people to like be weird. Anyway, I always have like pen and paper with me because I'm somebody that if I need to write something down, the physical act of writing, there's something so spiritual about it. And I'm definitely not if we're talking like manifestation, I'm not just somebody that like sits and I do this, but it's not my most potent form. I don't just sit and like think like, oh, this is like what I'm manifesting and here's a specific vision, all that stuff. Writing it out though and creating that energy, like I said, like more of a scripting type energy, that is a very spiritual practice for me. And then having a regular, literally going for walks, especially what I've been doing lately. And I'm not saying like if you listen to podcasts or music or audiobooks or whatever on your walks that you're not a spiritual person. I've just been doing this lately, honestly, more for like a dopamine reset purpose, but going on silent walks. So no music, no podcasts, no audiobooks. It's just me and Luna. It's typically in the morning. The mornings are my most spiritual time, and that's why they're so sacred to me. But having that like 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes where it's like the yarn ball of my thoughts gets to come apart a little bit and like I will have like messages come in. I also have really gotten into, I would say if I were to pick like one, what we see as stereotypically spiritual tool, actually, I would say there's probably two stereotypical spiritual tools. I would say cards have become a big one for me. And you've been such a mentor in that of like helping me learn the art and also encouraging me to use my intuition with the art instead of just learning. So
Mhm.
cards, like I'll do one at the beginning of every astrological season. I'll do new moon pulls sometimes or full moon pulls if I'm ever about to or like weighing a big decision. I'll do a card pull surrounding that. Like I also love the combination of structure and freedom that cards can give. Cause it's like, hey, here's this, the cards are kind of the structure. Like, here's this thing that already exists, this kind of esoteric concept that has some structure to it, but then you're weaving in your own intuition and kind of what it's all saying when they come together. So like that harmony of logic, intuition, masculine, feminine situation. And then I would say psychedelics. Psychedelics have been a big one. They are one that, especially mushrooms, they'll let me know when it's time. And if I don't answer the little knock knock, they'll make it so that I have to answer the little knock knock. But having a relationship to and reverence for and respect for psychedelics and the communities that they come from, that's been a huge part of my spiritual practice too.
I want to acknowledge, like, when we're writing, there's all kinds of literature on this, but like a spell, the word spelling derives from that word.
Mm-hmm.
And it is to write something into existence.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't write down whatever thought I'm having, it is an intangible nothing. Even if I say it out loud, it's still an intangible nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But if I write it down, that's the I like to, a phrase we use in our house is creating something out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the act of casting your spell. Like if I'm writing down, like, this is who I intend to be, it's a lot easier for you to hold yourself accountable to your own greatness and the actions that you need to take to connect to that greatness if you're writing it down. Because I don't know about you, but I can flip through and be like, looks like I was writing the same thing for 3 months and still not doing the thing. Like,
Yep. Oh, I can pinpoint. And also Dumbledore says words are our most inexhaustible form of magic. So like absolutely 100%. Like I can look through journals and this is not to like dog on myself when I've been having a hard time or to dog on anyone that's been having a hard time. But like I can look through journals and see where even like these last few months, because by the time this podcast comes out, like the large secret will have been revealed of the change that is coming. But like the last few months from June, and it was actually my like entire last journal. It's so ironic. June through October, I could progressively see how stressed and unhappy I was becoming. And I was constantly trying to like kind of muscle my way through it and all this stuff. But just the undertone of that book was the stress and not actually doing something meaningful about it. I thought I was doing something meaningful about it, but then, I learned what the actual meaningful thing that I needed to do was, which was just move. And so then looking back through that, I'm like, you sat in this for fucking 5 months. What are you doing? Like, and so like I can look back on that version of me and be like, you were just trying to figure it out. But all this stuff, but you're correct. Like you can go back and see like, oh, we're repeating the pattern. Oh, yep, we're still repeating the pattern here versus other journals that I've looked back on and I've been like, man, that was such a period of alchemy and you could feel it on every single page. Like it's night and day difference.
yeah. The idea of like looking at past selves through our own like writing is such a profound experience to me. Like I have one journal that is missing of all of my journals because I burned it because I literally was like, we are not doing that again. I don't care how much genius is in here, to toot my own horn. I think I'm pretty smart. I write some pretty interesting things. I'm like, I'm willing to let go of this. I'm willing to let go of this version of myself, metaphorically speaking. So my next question is, how do you take it from the page to, I like to call it like making your life that moving prayer or that moving spell? How do you take it from this is a good thought to now I'm actually doing something about it?
I love that. I love that so much. That's one of my favorite phrases. And I actually think one of the cards in this deck says something about making your life a moving prayer. I think that's the first place I ever heard that phrase. But for one, and as I trace back, I think the first place I've learned this obviously was through health and fitness, but you create the feeling internally before the outcome arrives because everything goes inward before it goes out. And so the way this works in like a health journey is, hey, your biofeedback starting. If a client's like, I'm not making any physical progress, but they're sleeping better, their digestion's better, their mood is better, all these things, I'm like, the inside is changing. That's what has to change first before the outside changes. So the feeling changes before the form changes. And I think that process of journaling and scripting and all of that, and actually when I'm doing that, when I'm journaling about in more of like the manifestation style scripting journaling, what I want to have happen, I do my best as I'm writing, and I write in such a way that I can invoke a lot of feeling or evoke a lot of feeling in myself, sitting with the feeling of what I want to create and what I want to be and what I'm trying to do, and experiencing that emotion and that just whole energetic experience in my body and being like, okay, this is the feeling that we're going for. And then something that I was able to put language to this last year was the whole higher self behavior concept. So if one of my favorite journal prompts that I take personal development clients through is just this entire, it's like a scripting of your highest self. Like, what do they do? What do they wear? What does their day look like? What do their routines look like? What does their mindset look like? There's a spider on the ground. Hello, friend. The other day I was recording and it's like bug season because it's fall. There was one like coming down from its web from my ceiling, and I was like, you know what? Just do your thing. Um, but so scripting out who that higher self is in a very detailed way, down to what they wear, down to what they have for breakfast, down to what their gym routine looks like, down to what they do for fun, like all of the things. And then that's your higher self behavior list. And then picking the one easiest thing from that list that you can start doing or that I can start doing to start embodying that energy. And typically I advise people just to kind of make the kind of overcoming the initial inertia part of change easier. I tell them to pick the easiest thing, the smallest thing that's the most realistic, that's the most accessible that you can start doing so that you can create that time warp between and like that timeline mesh of like, here's this person that I have this idealized version of as myself. Here's me. One's reaching down the hand to the other versus them being light years away. I am in a season at present where I am just band-aid ripping, where I'm like, okay, let me just do the fucking giant thing. And I think it depends on where you are in life and what you know of yourself and like the feelings that you get around an experience. So like, I've talked to you about the move, and when I was back, I was like, I'd had that intuitive knowing of this is what I've needed to do this whole time. This is where the stress has come from, and like all of this stuff, and like having that or not even necessarily where the stress has come from, but like this, I know that this will be salve to that. And so having that like greater intuitive awareness from like more years of practice to know that, oh, this is one of those higher self things. It's not necessarily the move that's the higher self thing. It's the trust in my knowing that this is what's going to help me. Just finding that one decision or that one action or that one habit or that one behavior that you wrote about from that experience that you want to create, and then doing that, because it's just like knowledge without application is nothing. You can quote unquote manifest all day long, but if there's no aligned action that follows the visualization or that follows the scripting, it's never going to happen. And I think that's a lot of where people mess up. It's like we talked about in the Positioning Yourself for Miracles episode that was a few episodes back. Like, the universe will hold out a hand, but you got to walk over and put your hand in hand with her. Otherwise, she's like, are you here? It's so funny. It's like, there's opposite situations that I see people getting into. And I actually talked about this on our staff call the other day, because one of our girls was talking about how she's like trying to let go of control. And I'm like, I'm giving you this advice just as much as I'm giving it to me. But it's like, when we white knuckle things, and if you're watching the YouTube video, you'll see the visual of this. When we white knuckle control grip on things, if my right hand is the universe, there's no room for her to get in. Like, there is no space because we've gripped so tight on this thing. But if we're completely hands off, the universe is like, okay, like I need your help and you're not here. So it's like we need to kind of find that right sized amount of I'm controlling my controllables, doing what I can do, taking the action, and then the universe can come in and be like, here's my part in this, let's go.
That's there's like the psychological and especially like relationship psychology component of reach and reply. And it's like, if you never reach, how are you supposed to get a reply?
Mm-hmm.
And The moment that you alert yourself that I am letting go of control, you are going to grip so much tighter.
Mhm.
I like I'm gonna let go of control. And your ego is like, no, the hell I'm not. Absolutely, I'm not. I'm not doing that at all. And there, I mentioned him in the last podcast that we recorded, but Alan Watts has a talk about the archer cannot like pull back, aim, and release. It has to be one fluid motion. You have to already know what you're doing, right? If you
Ooh.
alert yourself that you're doing something before you're doing it, everything in you is going to be like, nope,
Yep. Because
not.
like that's when your little logical monkey mind gets to come in and be like, oh, here's all the things that could go wrong, or like here's all the things that we need to do differently, or here's all the this and the that. And I'm so guilty of that. I've done that, for over 20 years until like the last few. And it's hard to get out of that, but that's almost why when we're talking about like learning to trust your intuition, don't be reckless and don't be, don't 0% consider potential outcomes, but at the end of the day,
Mhm.
stop just trying to figure every single detail of it out.
Yes, you have to get out of your head and into your body. You
Mm-hmm.
have to get into your body. And I like that you described the like, you have to cultivate this like felt experience within you too, because I am a big believer in alchemy.
Mm-hmm.
As above, so below, as within, so without. So if it's not happening inside of me, there's no way for it to happen outside of me. If I'm not cultivating that felt experience, that felt sense, it's never going to manifest, right,
Mm-hmm.
outside of me. And part of that felt experience, and something that I have been very disillusioned with in like new age spirituality, is the idea of like, okay, things come to me effortlessly and easily, and it's like, why aren't we putting in effort? Like,
Yep.
why is effort a bad thing? So what do you think about like those types of mantras and things like that?
Oh, I hate them. I hate them so much because, for one, they are not realistic. And I don't care how magical magic is, there is a very practical component to magic, right? Like, there has to be that equal effort. And think about it this way, like, what the fuck kind of relationship is it if the universe just drops everything at your feet because you said you wanted it, or like, it's, yeah, it's not healthy. That's really entitled. And that's not to say we should have to struggle for everything. It's a middle ground of, and also, what does it say about your desire for something if you are not willing to do anything for it? You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing to say you want to, again, I'll use like fitness examples because I work in the fitness industry. Let's say, like, it's one thing to say, I want to be able to squat 225 pounds for reps. It's another thing to go in the gym every single day and put in the work towards a structured training program that actually helps you accomplish that. You're not just going to walk under the bar one day and magically be able to squat 225 pounds. There's a process to that. And so to expect the universe that created all things through very meticulous processes, like, think of even just the journey of birth from inception to birth. That's fucking crazy. So to
Mhm.
think that we can just create without actually doing anything, and even the concept of alchemy, like, if you have like actual like chemical alchemy, if you just have two little chemical bottles sitting next to each other and you never combine them, no alchemy. They just sit
Nothing's
there.
gonna happen. Yep.
There has to be an action component. And so I think it's really silly of us. And I think some of this happens too because people are exhausted
Yes.
from the kind of
Yes.
like the pendulum swing that we did one way into now people are like, I just want to be able to exhale. And I understand that. But there is something so beautiful and so human about our ability to put in work towards something that we want. Like, I look at Luna, and if she were in the wild, the only work she could really put into something would be, I need to go get food. Like, I need to hunt. I need to sleep. I need to poop. I need to pee. I maybe need to procreate. Like, all of that stuff. We get to choose so much of our action and where it's directed. And
Mhm.
because we have consciousness, because we have, we've evolved beyond just, escaping threats and hunting for our food, for the majority, obviously. So the fact that we even get to say, this is what I want, and I want to go get it and to co-create with the universe. Co-create, that involves two things.
Co
Go.
co-create.
It's not just here it is. Like there is such an active role in that. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to just sit in the passenger passive seat of my life. I want a role in creating what it is that I want for myself. I don't want things to just show up at my doorstep. There's sometimes when I'm like, oh, this shit's hard. But if I were to really sit back and think about it, if I didn't have to do anything, I would be so fucking bored. And so I think the idea that we shouldn't have to, and everything should just flow easily to and through us. And if I really hate the idea that, well, if it's just not coming to you naturally, it's not meant for you. I think that is such a crock of shit. And I think the spiritual community is full of shit for giving people that idea. Just because it's not easy or not challenging in any way doesn't mean it's not meant for you. That just means like you express to the universe that you want to be this person. Maybe there's some work involved with that because that is a different version of the person that you are now. And that doesn't mean you're lesser and that the person you want to be is more. It just means it's different. So any kind of alchemy requires change. And so you have to be the one, you're the one doing the changing or wanting to do the changing. So you have to be the one to do the changing.
Yeah, the idea that, listen, I am open to $1 million just showing up on my doorstep.
Right.
I am
I'm not
open
saying
to
that. Yeah, I'm happy with
I'm
that.
open
That's totally
to
fine.
that. But if I want $1 million, I need to do something to make that happen. Right? We have these beautiful concepts of like, okay, this is like where I'm headed. This is who my higher self is. But if I just make that list that you talked about and then never do anything, right? Because maybe it's hard. Okay, well, why is hard suffering? Why have we like roped in just putting an effort to be something that causes us suffering? You know, it's to me a level of like bypassing our human experience, and we're here to be humans just as much as we are to be spiritually connected beings.
Absolutely.
And I really like the concept of alchemy. Like I could even have all of the parts. If I'm not the one sitting there like my mad scientist, I've got my apron and my goggles on, if I'm not like doing something with all of the tools that I have, nothing's going to happen. I'm still just going to sit there like waiting for the thing. Like, don't you want to put in some effort to make the thing happen, to get what you want? There's a phrase that I turned to a lot when I believed that like, oh, I'm an atheist. It was like 2 hands in action are better than 2 hands in prayer. And I realize now you need both, right? Because how are you supposed to be in union with mind, body, and spirit? Like they all have to be working together in a cohesive, I like to set it up in a triangle because that is the symbol for change, right? I like to set them up like I believe they all feed each other. So when you speak about mind, body, spirit connection, like where do you find yourself in that triangle? Where do you find yourself? What where's your start? Do you start with mind? Do you start with body? Do you start with spirit? Where's your start point?
I really feel, and I said this a few times in different ways, I really feel the starting point is the body, because the way I think about it, and obviously this could be like my earth placements, just being like, we like the physical realm. But the way that I think about it logically, and I've seen this in my life, I've seen this in clients' lives, I've seen this in other people in the industry's lives that started off in like the fitness body space and kind of moved towards the more spiritual. The body is the vessel that we're doing all of this work in, right? And even if we think about it down to like a hormonal and neurotransmitter level, which can affect the mind, if the body is not in good standing with its health, the mental suffers and the spiritual suffers. I don't know about you, but I have a really hard time connecting to spiritual practices when I'm fucking sick, when my body's not doing well, right? And I think there's a meditation that I listen to that says the creative energy of the universe doesn't have form. You have the power to give it form. And what better, or were we really doing it? Yep. Oh, Like we're witches in here or something, man. I love it. But truly, like, the body is what you have been given. It's literally the creative force of the universe put into physical form. And
Mhm.
so that is the house for your creative, spiritual, mental energy. And so I start there. I also find too that going back there as somebody, especially that lives in brain, like I have a lot of thoughts happening at all times, very chatty internal dialogue, the whole thing. Coming back to the body has saved me from the overuse of the mind so many times. And so that would be my entry point, would be the body and taking care of it. And that's a big delineator, I think, too, is a lot of people, and I see this obviously from a different viewpoint working in health and fitness, a lot of people have made the mistake of trying to change their bodies from a place of fear and distaste and hatred of themselves and of their physical form versus, and like, not nourishing themselves and all of the terrible things that especially women do to themselves to be as small as possible, versus the motivation to do things from a place of love and wanting to care for your body. That makes such a difference in that entry level energy, because what do you think you're going to get out of something if what you put in is fear and hate and deprivation and just, I don't like this thing, I'm trying to change it from this place of hating it, versus like the fuel that you're giving, what effect is that having on the mind and on the spirit?
Right. If it's an ingredient, it's gonna show up in the final product,
And
right?
that
If
was
it
Brittany's post this morning,
out.
which you should also look at. I'll link both of our posts from today in the show notes because those were good posts.
The I when I look at mind, body, and spirit, I look at the body feeds spirit, spirit feeds the mind feeds the body, right? So if we're looking at body as our starting point, I conceptualize that as the action I'm willing to take, right? So the action I'm willing to take sends a message to my spirit, or as I refer to it, my subconscious. My subconscious goes, okay, this is what I'm willing to do to manifest on your behalf, then. This is the action I'm putting in. This is feeding my spirit or my subconscious self. This subconscious self feeds my thoughts. My thoughts feed the action I'm willing or unwilling to take. And it moves in this cyclical change fashion. We're always undergoing change, even if no change is happening, right? So when we are looking at that entry point, what is my body willing to do? That is going to tell you exactly what you're going to manifest, right? If you're not taking any action, why the hell is your subconscious going to go, oh yeah, like this is going to work, this is going to feel good? Your subconscious doesn't have any like stimulus to do anything else with, right? So then it gets to your mind and it's like your mind's like, you're a lazy piece of shit, you're not doing anything, you're not doing anything, you're not doing anything. And that self-hatred feeds the action, right? And no one likes to self-motivate with guilt, despite the fact that we do a lot. No one actually likes it. So then it just becomes, it's an Ouroboros or a symbol for change or whatever it is that you want to call it, whatever you identify with, but it's all going to feed one another, right? So do you think that like if you were to just map out where you're at, mind, body, spirit, do you think that everything is flowing well? Do you find that you're experiencing any like, I need to be pulling some bricks down that I've like dammed up one place or another? Like, where do you think you're at on your flow with this right now?
I love, and first of all, I have to say, I love the way you just put all of that, because I think a lot of times when we talk about like esoteric or spiritual concepts, people can hear it. And one of my biggest goals with the show, with relaunching it, was actually teaching people how to embody the lesson. So people could hear the mind, body, mind, spirit, or body, spirit, mind thing and think, okay, that sounds great, but how do I actually do it? What you just said gives that a process. It's body taking action, spirit, subconscious gets the message. That feeds the thoughts of, hey, we're showing up and doing this, which then feeds more action to show up and do it. And then it's really beautiful. So that's so fucking practical. And I love that. I would say that I am just now in the inertia stage of that next phase of life where I really feel like I'm doing things correctly. Like I'm taking the action towards the things that I've felt kind of stuck with the last few months and putting them into play. It's like it's like when you're a coach of a sport, like knowing what play to execute. I think I've been in a stage of, okay, well, I'm trying this play. Okay, that one didn't necessarily work. Okay, we're trying this one. Fuck, that one didn't work either. And that definitely creates like a negative thought spiral. Like I was in a pretty rough place for a few months, but I feel like, especially if we're even talking about the health aspect of it, I've started working on like a new functional protocol to just help with some of my physical health stuff that resulted from stress. And it's so funny that you were saying all of that, because as I was sitting and thinking, I was like, oh my God, this is part of why embarking on a like health journey with a coach or like whatever it may be is so powerful, because you're actually taking action and giving that message to your subconscious, to your spirit, that like, hey, I'm committed to this and I'm doing this and I'm showing up for this, that feeds all of that. And it's so I would say, yeah, I'm on that path now. You had asked me that a few weeks ago, a month ago. I'd been like, yo, I'm still in the shit. I feel like I'm in quicksand. Like we're not quite there yet. I feel that disconnect. But it is so funny how that one change, that one decisional change of, okay, this is what I'm going to do now, and I'm going to show up and commit to that, creates that positive trajectory. And I've felt that even just in the last week. So I think we're getting back online.
So what do you think the most like people love to be like, what was your like biggest shift? I don't care. What was your most subtle energetic shift that has impacted your day-to-day life? What are the subtle energetics at?
Are we talking recent times or like just anytime?
Let's go for right now. What was the most subtle energetic shift that you were like, and we have motion now?
Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily think this was super subtle, but it was subtle enough in the way that it's like, duh, but it's noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at my whiteboard, and the other day I just sat down on my whiteboard and I wrote what feels really fucking aligned. And then I just started writing out a bunch of little teeny tiny things. They weren't massive things. They were little teeny
Mm-hmm.
tiny things like fall weather, being around family, being health minded, listening to music, love, all this stuff, and just getting that clarity. And then on the other side, I flipped it around and I was like, what doesn't feel fucking aligned? And so then I wrote all the little things and all the little ways that I'd been showing up, or all of the little ways that I had tried to be that weren't necessarily aligned with me. And I was just like, oh, that makes sense. That makes sense why you were in a weird place.
Mm-hmm.
You tried to put yourself in a situation that's not necessarily completely unaligned, but just doesn't belong on that what's really fucking aligned list. And then
Mm-hmm.
focusing on the things that are on that list. So it's okay. These are kind of small things. How can I focus on a little teeny tiny one every day? And that's not necessarily a super tangible thing, but even just the getting up and going on a walk in silence every day,
Mm-hmm.
that has already changed my internal state so much. And it's one of those things that because actually the coach that I'm working with, Vince, he's the one that told me to do it. When I first saw that on my protocol, I was like, I can handle all of this protocol, but this one, I don't want to do it. Because I was like, oh, I'm normally like listening to a podcast or like I'm on my phone and all this stuff. I was like, I don't want to do that. And then I was like, Emily, that's why you need to do it. Then if you're experiencing this much resistance to it, that's why you need to do it. And then even just within a couple days of not having that stimulus in my mind, I've already come to like such a greater state of peace and calm. And I'm like, that's what's shifting my energy, is having more peace and calm. And that peace and calm is one of those things that's on the what's really fucking aligned list, is feeling peaceful and feeling calm. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's like that little teeny tiny thing, getting clear on what the shifts that you want to have are, or for me, like what's really aligned for you. And again, that's another area where like putting pen to paper or like marker to whiteboard, it's like, oh shit, that really puts things in front of my face. So I can't question like, oh, what's wrong? It's like I see it right in front of my eyes. And then having just like that little part of my day that brings one of those feelings in.
Mm-hmm. So if people that are listening are looking for some like tangible, like, I want to know where I want the source that she's also connected to, right? Like, where have you found the most inspiration or self-understanding or guidance or whatever it might be, in connecting to and defining for yourself what spirituality is for you?
Mm, that is such a great question. And I think I have like a two-part answer. The first answer and this sounds so cheesy, and also there's probably people out there that are going to think this sounds so narcissistic, but truly it's been connecting with myself and connecting with what
Mm,
feels true and authentic to and for and within me versus, well, what am I supposed to connect to, or what am I supposed to like, or what am I supposed to be like? Stopping the pattern of shoulding myself
mm,
and truly getting to know myself, because you are a part of your spiritual practice. There is no personal
mm,
spiritual practice without you. You are, again, the creative energy of the universe in form, like given form. So, really connecting with yourself, with your values, with your beliefs, with your all of your different parts, all of your conscious, subconscious, all of that, connecting with your health, like all of those things have been really pivotal spiritual things for me. And then another cliche thing, but truly, truly, and again, maybe it's an earth sign thing, but going
mhm,
outside in nature, whether that's in the forest, whether that's in the middle of fucking Manhattan, whether that's in the mountains, whether that's at the beach, wherever you like, it doesn't matter where I've been outside, but just being outside and being around nature, that's
mhm,
connected me to so much more than I think any like breathwork seminar or any yoga retreat or any of that ever could, because what better depiction of the creative force of the universe in motion, unbothered, unfettered than nature? Like nature does not give a fuck. You
mhm,
look at, and like as many times as we've fucking damaged her and like whatever, like all the shit that we've done to the universe, or the amount of times that we've tried to establish control, we are reminded so swiftly that nature
mhm.
gives no fucks. She's going to be here whether we are or not. We
Yep.
need her more than she needs us. And it's like the perfect, right in front of our faces depiction of ourselves, like of our masculine, of our feminine, of death, of rebirth. I will never forget in 2019, my friend Chrissy and her husband Ben and I, we drove from Reno to Yosemite, and this was right after, or like the year after the wildfires. And I will
Mhm,
never forget seeing, as we drove up to Yosemite, first of all, just the freaking gorgeous mountain ranges, but second, because it was after the wildfires, the tops of the trees that were still singed and like that white
mhm,
charcoaly type look from something being burned, and then all of the new growth happening at the bottom. Like that was the most profound and simple visual I've ever seen of life and death happening at the same time, that it didn't take me going to an exhibit or going on even a psychedelic journey or whatever. It was just right in front of my face. Like nature just does it. It's just
yeah.
natural. And so when we're trying to think of how we can find calm or find peace or find release or let ourselves scream or let ourselves yell, like look at nature. She does that shit all the time.
Yeah. I think that especially for people that are in tune with their own cycles and seasons, that
Mm.
being able to go outside and see yourself, being able to see like your
Me.
own self outside and say, I can see me. Like we have a rose bush like right outside my window. And I've been like keyed into this like rose that I need to deadhead, where you take like the dead head off so like new
Mm.
growth can come in. I'm very aware of the areas of my life that I need to deadhead, right? I'm very aware that I can go outside and pay myself when I pay attention. The if you are looking to branch into some different reading, Mary Oliver and her like collections of poetry and her collections of essays are
Mm.
beautiful ones that will bring you to your knees with the reflection of yourself and the way that she describes nature and the way that she
I
describes
love
paying
that.
attention to
Yeah.
nature. So the last question I want to ask is, where do you see your spirituality influencing or evolving to inform your professional life? Where do you see that taking place right now?
Oh man. Oh man, isn't this the $1 million question? The first place
Mhm.
that I see it in present is within my work with my team. So I do
Mhm.
less client coaching than I ever have, but I meet with every single team member that I have one on one at least once a month, if not more. And yeah, we talk about work stuff, but I also focus a lot on, and I never project my spiritual beliefs onto anyone, but we focus a lot on like personal development. Where are you feeling held back? Where do you want to grow? Like, how can I help you do that? So, functioning as a leader in that way for my team. But I genuinely feel like, and I don't have and it's so fucking frustrating because I love, as we've talked about, knowing the plan. And you and I have talked about this a lot personally. I feel a much greater calling on my life to coach and to lead people in that more like personal development, spiritual wellness, expansion space. I just haven't fleshed out the details of it yet, in terms of what I look like as a leader in that realm and in that way. But I know that I have something to give people there. And I've seen glimpses of it. Like when I hosted a retreat with my friend Sarah this past April, the return retreat, that was one of my first forays into what I would consider more of like spiritual leadership and mentorship, because that was like a large part of my role at the event. But that's one of the things that's on my like what's really fucking aligned list, was like hosting retreats. And so I just know that I am somebody that my magic and my gifts and my ability to help people, I think I'm really good at helping people see themselves. And so working some in some capacity in that way, that always includes physical health and wellness, but that then goes beyond, and it's like, hey, let's dig into the stuff that's underneath. I definitely see that, and I've done some of that work already as far as working with personal development clients. But then kind of the growth of EDF had me needing to put my focus there more so than growing that. But I'm starting to kind of get the pull again, as we've talked about, to really dive in with what I would call like full service coaching of, it's not just the body, it's the body, the mind, and the spirit. And we're talking about all of it. So I
Mhm.
definitely see myself being a leader in that way, whether that's through retreats, whether that's through group programs, whether that's through one-on-one coaching. That's something that's in my mind and in my heart for, whether it's 1 year from now, whether it's 3, whether it's 5, whether it's tomorrow. I know
Mhm.
that that's in me, and that's something that I feel really passionate about.
Yeah, the to like astro forecast, like you, I have the advantage of just knowing like in my mind, right? And like you are going through an identity shift period ahead of an identity shift period, right?
It's
We've
such a
got the
bitch. It's
North Node,
such a
which is
bitch.
like in it really is. It really is. And like I want to say too, I commiserate deeply. Like my North Node was transited with Saturn before my Saturn return. So I had a little mini Saturn return of like aligning with destiny
That's what I
before
feel
it
like
was
right
like
now. It's like a mini Saturn return.
yes. So that is what's happening. Our North Node, for people, don't always know about astrology, is like the direction that we long to evolve into and take the versions of us that we've been before into that next version. That's ideal, right? Well, this is in your ninth house of spiritual leadership, of who am I as a spiritual teacher? Who am I as a spiritual student? And for you to be evolving, and part of how you show up is like, I'm showing you the process. That's the Virgo rising all day. Like people see you evolve in real time. There's no I won't say there's no mystery, because I do know that you keep some cards close while they're gestating, right? But like beyond that, there's not a lot of mystery. People get to see you change in real time. And this period ahead of your Saturn return, where Saturn comes knocking, I was like, hey babe, you ready to like fully step into yourself? Like I personally astrologically forecast that over the next like two to 2.5 years, you're going to be going through an evolution of really growing into and solidifying that concept of self as a spiritual teacher or a spiritual guide, or just someone that people look to for just spiritual help. So I definitely see you evolving into that role. And like I said, I get to see these things happening behind the scenes. So I'm glad that we had this opportunity, that people got to see even just a glimpse of like things that I get to see, you know, on a regular basis.
Oh, thank you. That means so much. And it's so nice to have that reflected back. And I also just want to say, like, have a nice little vulnerable moment. I know that I'm a process shower, but this particular process, the fact that I haven't figured it out yet, it is so painful of like, I just want to know what it is and like how I'm supposed to show up and serve people and blah, 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 blah. Like, it's so hard. Like, this gestation period is so hard, but it's also fun. So I'm like, it's the hardest thing I've done yet, but it's fun. And I still obviously have a huge love for what it is that I already do. So that makes it easier. But it's also like the tension between those two things, like, dang, dang. And I also know people are ready for it. Like, I get asked about it all the time. And so being able to have the respect for myself and my journey to say not yet is so hard, but I am so grateful that I'm doing that. But yeah, this leg of the journey is a challenger, but we
Yeah.
love her.
The discomfort of not knowing is just like, I'm not in control. And I have started to look at like, I'm not in control as like, thank God I don't have to figure this out. Like something else is going to alert me when it's time to figure it out. That knowing that you talked about at the beginning,
Yep.
I will know. That's how I'm in integrity with myself. And I feel like that's what you like show up as, is like, I could be out of integrity with myself and say yes to people simply because they're asking. But you're like, I know, like capital K, know that it's not yet. And I'm willing to wait until it is.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big thing too for anyone listening, is with any of your like spiritual practices or any journeys in your life or like anything that you say yes or no to, like stay in your integrity to yourself. Because if I were to like, and there have been times in my life where like I have, you know, said yes to things small and large that were not within my integrity to myself. And those are the hardest things to sit with. So never give a yes that's not a hell yes. Never make a move that you don't have to make that's not a hell yes, because that will eat at your soul until you like, we want to put it in religious terms, like repent to yourself and apologize to yourself for going against your own like best interest and integrity. Like, those are the things that are hard to sit with. It's so much harder to sit with that than it is to sit with the unknown. 100%. Yeah.
Well, thank you for letting me flip the script here and interview you.
Dude, this was so fucking fun. You crushed it. You crushed it. So I'll have you, like, everybody knows where to find me. This is my podcast. So you guys, I think you know who and where I am if you're here. But Britt, I know you've been on here. This is your third time on the podcast. Oh my God, you're officially one of the highest repeat guests then.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I do love that.
Love that. Also, I see you're wearing your 3 necklace. Was that strategic?
I just wear this every day. And I want to say too, I told you I was at the store.
Yeah.
Shopping. I was like, what is between my boobs? And I like look down and my necklace has unhooked itself and it's just like sitting in my cleavage. And I'm like, God, is that you?
Oh my God.
Some motorboating action. Like, threes are our God consciousness. Is that what we're doing here? Like, it's just so weird. It was not on purpose, but 333 is a follower right now. So
we love that. We love that. So yeah, Britt, plug away. Where can people find you? Where can they work with you? All of that jazz.
Yes. So I actually just opened my one-to-one client list back up for Paradox coaching. So you can apply to interview with me. Lionhivecoaching.com. You can find all of my links on Instagram. Follow me, lionhive_. And my member site, lionhivecoaching.com/paradoxplay.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for being an amazing host. It takes a lot for me to give up my host hat, and you crushed it. You made this an easy one. So thank you so much. Thank you for the amazing conversation, just for being willing to do this and for being my friend.